Mercado Libre is still using the Amazon Playbook and is still growing 30% plus in Latin America, and these Q2 earnings have confirmed us that Mercado Libre is really a giant in the industry and in the region. I'm Eddie from Toko Alpha Mind, and in this video we are going to deep dive in the latest earnings for Mercado Libre, and we are going to see if it's still a good investment and why it has every characteristic of Amazon and definitely a great compounder. So let's get started. So first, Mercado Libre is a Latin America company which is mainly operating in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, and actually has two main business lines. So their e-commerce business and their fintech business. And so why we are talking about Mercado Libre today is because they are taking the playbook of Amazon and are growing more and more each year. And they are investing a lot to actually continue to grow and build this infrastructure in all Latin America. So today we are going to deep dive into the Q2 2025 earnings and see if the growth is still continuing and if they are still dominating in their two main business lines. So now let's review together the main figures for Mercado Libre on this quarter. So GMV grew by 37.2%, which is actually pretty solid. And what we can see is that they have a pretty high growth, at least in all the products that they are selling in their e-commerce business. If we look at the fintech business, so what we can see is that TPV, so total payment volume, is growing by 60.9%. Asset under management grew by 808%, and their credit portfolio, so their lending business, is growing by 90%. So what we are seeing from Mercado Libre is actually a lot of growth in both the e-commerce part and the fintech part. And just a few KPIs as well. So what we have seen is that they have now 71 million unique buyers and a growth from last year of 25%, which is actually pretty good. And on the fintech side, so they have now 68 million monthly active users, a growth of 30%. So also very impressive from Mercado Libre. On the financial side, so what we are seeing is that net revenues actually grew on an FX neutral basis, of 53% and 34% on a reported basis, which is actually also pretty good. And in terms of operating margin, I think that this is where Mercado Libre definitely disappointed a little bit investors, is that what we are seeing is that in terms of net income margin, they actually landed at 7.7%, which is actually pretty low, or which is actually lower than what analysts expected. And this reflects actually more investment from Mercado Libre, especially on two sides. On the first side, which is more investment to provide more free shipments in the different regions, and on the fintech side, so more investment to actually grow the lending business and the lending book, so which means that more money to be put into reserves. So what we are seeing, so this quarter from Mercado Libre is actually a very strong growth, and what we are seeing is that Mercado Libre is still a huge compounder in Latin America, which is very impressive. So now if we go into details, so country by country, so their main business and their main markets for Mercado Libre are Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. So in Brazil, we've seen revenue growth of 25%, mainly driven by both the commerce and the fintech business, equally growing at 25 and 24%. In Argentina, we saw huge growth actually, mainly due to the decline of the Argentine pesos, but still a huge growth in Argentina, 77%, and mainly driven by the fintech business at 81%. In Mexico, so what we are seeing is that a growth of 25%, also like driven by the fintech business at 28% and the commerce business at 24%. And so overall, so on a consolidated basis, so Mercado Libre reported a growth of 34% in terms of revenue, and really driven by the fintech business, as we can see, with a growth of more than 40%. So we are seeing that both the commerce and the fintech business are growing more than 30%, and which shows that actually Mercado Libre has huge tailwinds in Latin America. Now, if we go a little bit deeper into their e-commerce business, for example, so what we've seen is that Mercado Libre has actually decided to invest more and more to provide free shipments. And so today, so 52% of their shipments are same or next day delivery, so for all the different regions, and they want to accelerate that. That's why they are investing more and more into their infrastructures, into their warehouses. This is something that no one can really replicate today, even Amazon in Latin America, and that's really one of the key modes for Mercado Libre. And so what we are seeing is that more and more users are actually coming from offline to online thanks to this type of initiatives from Mercado Libre. which really reflects the really power and the moats that they have in Latin America and serving e-commerce in those regions. So in terms of free cash flow, and this is where we are seeing that MercadoLibre is taking a page from Amazon's playbook. So cash from operation was actually this quarter at $2.9 billion. And what we are seeing is that two main actually expenses or two main cash drivers reduce this cash from operation in terms of adjusted free cash flow. So the first thing is the funding and the investment they are doing with their fintech businesses, which actually reduced the cash from operation by $800 million. And we're also seeing like almost $300 million in terms of capex, so which reduce and land to a free cash flow of $454 million for Mercado Libre on this quarter. So what we are seeing is that there is a lot of potential in terms of free cash flow, but today Mercado Libre is on investing mode, and basically almost all the cash from operation is going into growing the business, and so that's why the adjusted free cash flow today is actually not pretty high. Added to that, so what we've seen is that also the advertising business is growing 38% year on year. And this really shows that Mercado Libre is really following the playbook laid out by Amazon, because what we are seeing is that now they are growing their advertising business alongside their e-commerce business, and they are providing advertising solutions for merchants, which really is a high margin business and which is really going to help Mercado Libre grow in this industry. And definitely, so we are talking about the playbook laid out by Amazon, but this is also the playbook laid out by Alibaba. So what we know is that this is a formula that works, and that's why we are investing in Mercado Libre, and that's why we definitely think that it's going to continue to grow going forward and deliver more and more value for the customers. Beyond the figures, so we are also seeing that Mercado Libre is growing very quickly in their fintech business. So fintech business actually composed of both the kind of banking services or fintech services, as they call it, so providing like bank accounts or providing financial services to people, and their payment business, so mainly acquiring payments, where they provide acquiring solutions for merchants and for different websites. So very similar to what we have with Stripes or with Square, for example, or actually with PayPal, with Braintree. So what we know is that this is a business which is actually highly profitable and which is really going to grow going forward, especially where e-commerce and a lot of different digital services are actually growing in this region. So definitely, they are going to continue to grow in their fintech business, both in terms of payment, because we are seeing that TPV is growing very fast in the regions. So both in Argentina, in Brazil, in Mexico, for example. And definitely this is going to be a huge growth driver for Mercado Libre. And what we are seeing is that they have huge synergies between their e-commerce business, their payment business, and their banking business. And definitely Mercado Libre is really poised to actually continue grow with those rates of 30% per year. Okay, so now what's next for Mercado Libre? So actually, from January 1st, 2026, so their historical CEO is going to retire and we will have a new CEO. So this is kind of a transition period for Mercado Libre, and we definitely think that the new transition is going to actually go very smoothly because it has been prepared well in advance, but definitely a new era, very similar to what we have been able to see actually with Amazon. So from the transition from Jeff Bezos to Andy Jassy. So we will see the same thing as well for Mercado Libre. And there are a lot of reasons to be very optimistic and to think that the growth is going to continue. First, because the growth in the region is still going to continue very quickly. So in Brazil, in Argentina, and in Mexico, for example. And they also have like other regions to actually tackle. And they have demonstrated that they have been able to actually tackle a lot of different challenges, especially, for example, a challenge regarding the foreign exchange rates and all this type of currencies and all these type of nuances in the region. They have been able to manage very well. So we think that they don't really have like huge competitors, I would say, at the scale in Latin America. They may have strong competitors locally in certain regions, but given the scale of Mercado Libre that they have today, they definitely can provide a lot of value. And we are seeing that with the type of shipping schemes that they are developing with same and next day delivery, which is actually quite difficult to do in Latin America if you know the region. And we definitely think that given all of these characteristics, Mercado Libre is poised to continue to grow very strongly in the region in both their e-commerce and their fintech business. Okay, so what's the takeaway from this Q2 2025 earnings from MercadoLibre? But basically what we have seen with all these numbers is that MercadoLibre is still continuing to perform very, very well. Even though that they are still investing quite heavily into their e-commerce business to really drive people onto e-commerce, and also invest very heavily in their fintech business to really expand all the services and the loan book that they have. So which shows that MercadoLibre is still in investment mode. And what we have seen from Amazon and Alibaba in different regions of the world is that this is a winning formula. And based on that, I think that we can be very confident that MercadoLibre is continuing to be a compounder and going to provide strong returns for your portfolio going forward. If you're interested in other analysis like this one, so please check my other videos, please subscribe, and I see you in another one. Bye.